Sometimes the class has a method that the code inside this method is the same as the code inside the constructor. So why we repeat the code? Why we don't just call that method internally within the constructor? Let me show you an example. This is our example for a class pet. As you recall, it has multiple constructors. Look at the second constructor, which is this one. It initializes the three instance variables, the pet name, the pet age, and the pet weight. See what does it do? It copies the name, and at the same time, it tests for age and initial weight. If they are negative, then it will stop the system and the program will exit. Otherwise, it will save them into age and weight. By comparing this constructor with another method inside the same class, which is setPet, notice that the code is the same. It is repeated. The same parameters and the same code inside. So why we don't just go to the constructor and call this method and supply the parameters that are coming from the constructor to this method and make the code not repeated. So in Java, it is allowed to call a method that is defined within the same class inside the constructor. But we have to be careful. You cannot just call any method. So attention here is that if you call a method that is defined public, then a problem might happen. We are not going to discuss this problem because this issue will happen with inheritance, which is covered in chapter 8, and this is not covered even in your class. So avoid the problem of calling a method that is public within your class. For our example, the class pet, setPet method is defined as public. Although inheritance is not involved in our example, but we need to avoid calling a public method inside the constructor. So how to avoid this problem? Simply by making a method a private. So here, this is how we can do it. We can make setPet a private, and this is how we can call the method within the constructor. We simply supply the parameters given to the constructor as parameters to the private method setPet. But this will create another problem that if you make it a private, then we will not be able to call it from outside when we create an object and we wanted to change the initial name, initial age, and initial weight of a pet. So this will create another problem. So the solution is that we define a separate method that is a private, and we are going to use it only inside the class. So it will be an internal method, and we can use this method anywhere. We can use it in the constructors as well as inside setPet. Let me show you how we can do this. The class pet is now redefined, and we call it pet2. Still, it has the same data members and still the same constructors. The difference is that we have defined a private method which is called set. See, notice it is a private, and its purpose is that to give a new name, a new age, and a new weight for a pet. And this private method is used everywhere. See, it is used in this constructor, and it is used in the second constructor and the third constructor, and etc. For the first constructor, we are supplying the three parameters coming to the constructor to this method. For the second constructor, we are supplying the initial name coming from the constructor, but the age and weight are given both zeros to set, and set will set them to 0. Similarly for the rest of the constructors, and depends on which constructor you are calling. Now look at setPet, which is the public method that we have before. Still, it is using set, so it is the same code that we are using for the constructor, we are using for setPet. But the constructor, remember that it is called when you create the object, but setPet, you can change the name and age and weight of a pet after you create the object. Now, if you look at, for example, setName, if you want to change only the name, but you want to keep age and weight as they are, see how we are using set. Now, the new name coming from the method setName is supplied as input parameter to set. But age and weight here, they are not input parameters. In fact, they are the same data members we have inside the class. So this age will be copied into a new age, and the weight, which is the weight inside the class, will be copied to new weight, and again it will copy them back to age and weight. So we are not going to change age and weight when we call the set method. In conclusion, In Java, it is allowed to define more than one constructor, but make sure that each of them, the number of parameters and their data types are different from each other. Also, if you have a repeated code in these constructors, then you can assign a private method. You put this code in this method and then use this method internally for the repeated code. And also you can use this method as well in other methods that you define within the same class.